What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing one of my favorite things, which is comparing the current NBA to the NBA of the past. And more specifically today, we're going to be looking at current players and their best legend comparison. Now, when I compare these players to NBA legends, I'm not saying that the current players are better or even equally as good as those players. It just happens to be that those two players have the most similar playstyle. So with that being said, here's 20 current NBA players and their best legend comparison. And up first, we have none other than LeBron James. And most people, when they compare LeBron to a legend, they always look to Magic Johnson. But for me, I never bought that comparison because LeBron, he is much better defensively and is a much better scorer. I do understand why people compare him to Magic because both have a high basketball IQ and they're both tremendous passers. But for me, the LeBron comparison, it has always been Oscar Robertson. Oscar and LeBron, they are both elite scorers and great passers and just great all-around players in general. Both players are also great at getting to the basket, finishing the lane, and running the pick and roll. And I think if Oscar put on about 50 pounds of muscle, it would be very hard to tell the difference between him and LeBron James. Now, moving on, we have Kawhi Leonard. I think his best comparison is Michael Jordan. Now, Kawhi and Jordan, they are both lethal mid-range shooters, elite operating out of the post, and when they have an ISO, they're almost machine-like in the way they're able to pick apart the defense and get to the basket or get any shot they want. Now, Kawhi, he is not nearly as athletic as a prime Michael Jordan, so I would compare him to a 1998 Michael Jordan who was slower and relied way more on skill to score the ball and be effective on the court. And next up, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo. And for Giannis, it was kind of hard to find an exact comparison for him. I think there's a bunch of players that you could say resemble Giannis, but the player I decided to go with was Kevin Garnett. Now, KG and Giannis, they are both tremendous two-way players, elite level scorers, tremendous rebounders, and underrated passers. And I think one of the big similarities between KG and Giannis is just the pure anger they play with on a nightly basis. Giannis and KG, they never take a night off and they never back down from any of their opponents. And I think that intensity they play with, that's a huge reason I chose KG for Giannis' comparison. And next up, we have Steph Curry, and for his comparison, I chose Jerry West. Now, both West and Curry, they are great shooters from anywhere on the court, and yes, Jerry West, he did not play the three-point line, but he was still a lethal jump shooter, whether that be the deep two or a nice mid-range shot. On the defensive end, I also think Curry and West, they are very similar. They're not a lockdown defender, but they are smart and very good team defenders. In the past few years, Steph Curry, he has tremendously improved on the defensive end. And I think you could also say that Steph is a little bit of a combination of Jerry West and Mark Price, because Mark Price, he was one of the innovators of the pull-up three and shooting the jump shot off the dribble. And moving on from Steph Curry, we have his former teammate Kevin Durant. Now for KD, he is one of one, so I had to give a hybrid of two different players, and those players were George Gervin and Dirk. Now for George Gervin, he is very similar to Kevin Durant, as they are both high-efficiency scoring players. They are both extremely smooth and savvy at getting to the basket, and their length, it really does help them finish around the rim and shoot over smaller defenders. Now on the Dirk side of the comparison, both have a lethal fadeaway jump shot, and their size, being near 7 foot tall, it virtually makes them unguardable in the post. And both these players, their skill and footwork is virtually unmatched for being 7 foot tall. And you really can't compare one player to Kevin Durant, so I had to give a hybrid of George Gervin and Dirk Nowitzki. And up next, we have James Harden, who is another very difficult player comparison. But out of all the players in NBA history, I think Sarunas Marciulionis, he's the closest thing we've ever seen to James Harden. Now, both of these players, they are crafty lefties who love driving to the basket and creating contact, and they're also very underrated at how strong they are, and they really do embrace fouls and getting to the free throw line. And the footwork and moves that both James Harden and Marciulionis possessed, they were definitely ahead of their time. And for defenders, it was extremely hard to keep both Marciulionis and Harden in front of you. And the first 6 players we've taken a look at have mainly been perimeter-oriented players, but next, we're going to take a look at some of the great big men of today's era and compare them to the great big men of past eras. And first up, we have Joel Embiid, and his best legend comparison, I think, is Hakeem Olajuwon. Both Embiid and Olajuwon, they are great post scorers who can overpower you and they can finesse you at the basket. They both have a variety of spin, reverse pivot, and just up and under moves that'll make your head spin. And both these big men, they have very good touch around the basket. The one obvious thing Hakeem is better than Joel at is playing on the defensive end. But besides that, I think their offensive game, it is fairly similar. And Joel, he's learned a lot from studying the footwork of Hakeem. And another extremely skilled big man in today's NBA is Nikola Jokic. I think his best legend comparison is Arvydas Sabonis. Both Sabonis and Jokic, they're extremely skilled passing big men, and up until recently, both these guys, they were kind of hefty. I know Jokic, he has cut down on his weight, but besides that, they are great flashy passers. They have a variety of sneaky moves, and they really are crafty and faster than you think. And one thing that is very similar between both Sabonis and Nikola Jokic is the fact that they make the extraordinary look extremely ordinary. I mean, the difficult pass these guys have, it's just a gift that they were born with, and you really can't teach this passing ability at that size. And continuing the theme of extremely skilled big men, we have Anthony Davis. And his best legend comparison, I think, is actually Tim Duncan. Both Duncan and Davis, they have an extremely high defensive impact. They are also great shooters. Tim Duncan, he wasn't the three-point shooter that Davis is, but in the mid-range game in the post, Duncan, he was lethal with his turnaround bank shot. And their overall skill set on both ends of the court and just their understanding of the game, it is very rarely seen at the power forward position. And I think Duncan, he relied more on skill than Anthony Davis did, but both these players, extremely skilled big men who can do it all on both ends of the court. And the last big man we're going to take a look at for now is Rudy Gobert. And Gobert's best legend comparison is Dikembe Mutombo. Now, both Mutombo and Gobert, they are known for the extremely wide wingspans and their ability to block a wide variety of shots. But besides that, both these players have a huge impact on the game, especially in the paint, as they force players to take very difficult shots, and even if they don't block the shot, they're still altering the shot and making it extremely difficult for the player to score. And I think their impact, it can go unnoticed sometimes on the offensive end, but defensively, these two guys are elite, and they are very similar when it comes to blocking shots and grabbing rebounds. So that was a couple of the great big men today, but next, we're going to take a look at some of the great point guards and compare those players to NBA legends. And up first, we have Damian Lillard, who I think is a hybrid of Allen Iverson and Brandon Roy. And Lillard, he is most like Iverson in his ability to have a quick first step and a lethal crossover, and the fact that he embraces contact and he lives around the basket. He also has sneaky hops similar to a young AI, and they're just tough physical players who are warriors on the court. Now, the Brandon Roy side of this comparison, it mainly has to do with Dame's shooting ability. He's one of the best deep shooters in the NBA. He can also shoot off the dribble as well as pull up. Similar to Brandon Roy, they're both lethal jump shooters. So I think Dame, he's a combination of Allen Iverson and Brandon Roy. And Dame's biggest rival is none other than Russell Westbrook. And Westbrook, he's the one player on this list I really could not find a comparison for. The best thing I could come up with was a combination of a young D Rose and Oscar Robertson, and even in my opinion, I think that comparison, it's meh at best, because Westbrook, he's like a player we've never seen, an extremely athletic and fast guard who goes 110% on both ends of the court every single night. And I think maybe in the future, we'll see someone like Westbrook, but for now, I don't think there's a definitive comparison for Russell Westbrook. Now, the player Westbrook was traded for last year was Chris Paul, and his legend comparison is Isaiah Thomas. And I really see the similarities of Isaiah and Chris Paul, and the way they lead their teams. They are the floor general on the court, and they control every aspect of the team, whether that be on the defensive end or the offensive end. I also think both these players play with a competitive fire that is not really seen in the point guard position. They're not afraid to get in your face and challenge other opponents. They also both have great handles, and they make all their teammates around them better. And I think some of the stuff these guys do, it does not show up on the stat sheet. So that's why I say Chris Paul, his best comparison is Isaiah Thomas. And one of the best up-and-coming young point guards is Ja Morant. And for Ja, his best legend comparison, I would say, is Kevin Johnson. Now, Kevin Johnson, he's one of the most underrated point guards in NBA history, but if you go back and watch his film, I think he is very similar to a young Ja Morant. Now, both these players, they are fierce at attacking the basket, and they live in the paint, and they shoot a very high percentage when they get to the basket. They also have crazy bounce and extremely fast, quick twitch muscles. And I think passing is a very underrated aspect of both these players' games. I think they're just as good passing the ball as they are scoring the ball. So that's why I say Ja Morant, he's the modern day Kevin Johnson. Now, moving on from Ja, we have Zion Williamson. And Zion's played less than 25 NBA games, but based on what I've seen, he reminds me of a young Charles Barkley. Now, both Barkley and Zion, they are undersized forwards, and when it comes to rebounds, they are extremely good at getting the putback points, which is really something you can't teach. It's a skill that you're just kind of born with. And both these players finish very well through contact and around the rim. And also one of the obvious comparisons is that both these players, they have struggled with their weight, and it's a big concern early in Zion's career, similar to how it was early in Barkley's career. Now, Zion, he's definitely a high flyer, and another high flyer in the NBA is none other than Zach LaVine. And LaVine's legend comparison for me is none other than Vince Carter. Now, let's get the obvious out of the way. Both LaVine and Carter, they're extremely high flyers. They live above the rim, and their hang time is virtually unmatched. And both these players' finishing ability, it is not just limited to dunks. Both of them are very crafty around the rim with the reverse layups, the behind the back shots, and just a variety of moves that makes them very difficult to block at the rim. Now, a thing that might get overlooked in this comparison is the fact that LaVine and Carter, they are both very good three-point shooters, and for me, that shooting ability, that's what really makes Zach LaVine the modern-day Vince Carter. And up next, we have Donovan Mitchell, and I think his best player comparison is a mix of Dwayne Wade and Baron Davis. And all three of these players, they always go 110% on the court, and even when it seems like they're out of control, they are weirdly always in control. And around the basket, all of them are ferocious finishers, and they'll finish over, around, or through you. And the main go-to move of all these guys is slashing to the basket and finishing through contact. I think that really makes all these guys very similar, and their athleticism and confidence just to go in the lane on a nightly basis and try to finish over the bigs. It is something very rare out of the shooting guard position. Now, the last shooting guard we're going to take a look at is Devin Booker, and D-Book, his best comparison is a hybrid of Kobe Bryant and Gilbert Arenas. Now, on the Kobe side of the comparison, both these players are extremely smooth on the offensive end. They both have a variety of moves, whether that be the pull-up, the step back, the off the dribble, the pump fake, the step through. These guys, they have basically every move in their arsenal, and their footwork, it is impeccable. And Booker, he reminds me most of the number 24 Kobe, in that his game, it relies mostly on skill, footwork, and finesse. Now, for the Gilbert Arenas side of the comparison, it mainly has to deal with the shooting ability of Booker, as he's one of the best shooters in the NBA, and it doesn't really matter if it hands in his face. When he gets hot and when he gets streaky, he is virtually unstoppable, and that reminds me a lot of Gilbert Arenas. Now, the last player we're going to take a look at is Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics, and Tatum's best legend comparison is Paul George. And whether you consider Paul George a legend or not, that is besides the point, as both these players, they're extremely good in the ISO situations, and their handle, it is very similar to how smooth it is with the step backs and the wide crossovers. And I think one aspect of Tatum's game that is very underrated is how good a defender he is. And he can really effectively guard 1 through 4 on the court. So that defensive ability combined with the offensive arsenal, that makes Jason Tatum's comparison Paul George. And like I said in the beginning, this is one of my favorite things to do, comparing the current NBA to the NBA of the past. And I think it's always important to study the past players, and a lot of current players, they really do study the film and learn a lot from the older generation. So that really is all I have to say, and as always, thank you guys for watching this video. I'll see you guys next time.